In our initial entry into Traverse Town, I had stated that I originally found this world to be a bit boring in my younger years, and perhaps that's because of the normalcy that it presents in contrast to the colorful Disney worlds that surround it. Or maybe it's because I had to come back to this world multiple times when I really just wanted to get to the next world. Regardless of what way it actually was, that feeling has definitely changed over time, and especially so since starting the series. Speaking of, I had originally intended for Traverse Town to be one big video that explores everything in this world. However, seeing just how much Traverse Town has to offer and just how important the world is to the overall story, it really needed to be broken up. And from seeing just how many people have responded positively to this series, I think it's safe to say that it was the right move. So, thank you. Thank you for everything. And without further ado, let's explore Traverse Town with... After completing the next 3 worlds, Wonderland, Olympus Coliseum, and Deep Jungle, we returned to Traverse Town to learn more about the goings-on of the ever-looming darkness and the rest of this world. Now that the gang has some new abilities to show off, we're able to explore more of Traverse Town, finding Leon and Aerith hidden in the secret waterway. When we first speak with Leon, he mentions that as we find the keyholes of each world, locking them one by one, we're also locking away the heart of the world, keeping it safe from destruction by the Heartless. This concept may seem a bit far-fetched and made up just for the series, but it actually has some deep ties to ancient philosophy and myth of a world's soul. Known as anima mundi in Latin, the concept of a world having a soul, or in Kingdom Hearts' case, a heart, stems from the ancient Greco-Roman belief that every creature on the planet, including the planet itself, had a soul, or heart, that connected to one another. Through this connection, the world's soul or heart, you know what, I'm just gonna say heart from now on because you get the point. The world's heart animates the planet into becoming a living being, capable of intelligent thought and action, all while sharing this intellectual and spiritual connection to not only the inhabitants of the world, but with the cosmos as well. This sentiment is further established when considering the fact that both the Greeks and the Romans believed in primordial beings, ancient life that acted as the personifications of everyday life and the concepts that went along with it. Beings such as Uranus, who was the primordial of the sky, and Gaia being the personification of the earth, both of whom acted upon and were connected to one another, all while being connected to the other smaller life forms in existence. This heart of the world can also be seen as the world egg, a concept that states that all life came from this cosmic egg when it cracked open, filling the cosmos and the world with life and intelligent thought. This is actually something I discuss in my video on the World Soul Saga for World of Warcraft. You can actually click the tab right up here, and I've left a link in the description if you want to learn more about this in greater detail. Let's continue on to the next thing that Leon mentions to us. If we speak with Leon again, he'll provide us with his personal lucky charm, a charm that seems to have some magical properties to it. This is a very important item that we'll be learning more about in just a minute. But after acquiring this, he tells us to go find Sid to learn more about the Nav gummies that we've acquired. After berating us for not knowing about gummies, Sid hands us an old book to deliver to the old man just past the 3rd district. At the same time, the clock tower chimes and shakes the whole area. We're told to deliver the book first before investigating the mysterious bell chime, but really you can do either tasks in either order. But we follow Sid's orders and head out to the fire door, where we find an old and worn down cottage. Upon entering it, we find the room to be quite empty, though we soon meet the lively sorcerer Merlin, who provides the room with some much needed warmth and homely amenities. If you remember from our excursion through Destiny Islands, you might remember Merlin being mentioned in the discussion on Excalibur. This is the same Merlin who placed the sword in the stone in the legend of King Arthur. Merlin is a fascinating character, in my opinion, as he is explored in a lot of 12th and 13th century legends and poem cycles, from stories of his birth from a virgin and a demon to his capture and entrapment within a tree by the Lady of the Lake. Merlin's story is extremely vast and complex, so I'll be going over a good bit of his history and mythology, but I'll also provide some links if you're interested in learning more yourself. In Arthurian myth, Merlin is seen as a mentor to the Pendragon line, as well as being a mischievous and sometimes troublesome ally to many. In addition, Merlin was said to have the powers of prophecy, magic, and even druidic powers, as many of his tales depict him shape-shifting at will. In one tale depicting his prophetic powers, he speaks with the Knights of the Round Table of their holy and great quest to find the Holy Grail, telling them of the future he has foreseen of their acquisition of the Grail, only to suddenly vanish before them. In another tale, he attempts to swoon the seeress Morgan, at the same time as one of his students, Vivienne, leading to him and his bloodline being cursed for eternity. These tales, and many others like them, seem to originate from the pseudo-historical memoir of the Historia Regum Britanniae, a collection of stories and historical notes of Britain's creation and rise to power. As well, many of Merlin's tales seem to come from the French prose and Vulgate cycles that tell of his exploits during this time. Digging into his origins, we find that Merlin's name seems to derive in part from the author Geoffrey of Monmouth in his studies of the Welsh tales of the legendary prophet and bard Merlin, as well as the great military general Ambrosius. Thus, the figure Merlinus Ambrosius was created to bridge the connections between the Welsh and Anglo-Saxon history and legends. I should note that historians like Nikolai Tolstoy and many others believe that Merlin may have actually been a real person during the 5th century CE, as well as a mythical figure of Arthurian legend. Sadly, however, it's been lost to time as to who exactly this person specifically was. With that said, Merlin is actually the inspiration for many sagely characters that appear slightly off-kilter. Characters like Bugenhagen from Final Fantasy VII and even Gandalf from Lord of the Rings are such. Continuing further, Merlin informs us that he is here to help Sora learn more about the magic that he uses, and he even provides us with a small sanctuary to practice a lot of the new spells and summons that we'll acquire in our journey. And in addition to Merlin's help with magic, the Fairy Godmother joins us as well in helping with increasing our magical prowess by learning new summons through some of the items we gather in our journey. Our first is actually from Leon's Lucky Charm, as mentioned before, the Earthshine item, getting us Simba from the Lion King as a summon. Unsurprisingly, there's a lot to unpack here in just this small interaction, so let's start off with the Fairy Godmother, as there's more to her than meets the eye. When we discussed the story behind Cinderella in our beginning steps into Destiny Islands, you may have noticed that the Fairy Godmother was left out. I mean, she is a very big part of Cinderella's story after all, so why didn't I include her? Well, if you remember, I had mentioned that there are multiple stories of Cinderella throughout the ages, and the inclusion of the Fairy Godmother actually comes from an older variation of the story, specifically the French version, written by Charles Perrault in 1697 CE, 115 years before the Grimm brothers' tale. In this story, it plays out much the same to the Disney adaptation. With Perrault's version, the Fairy Godmother was the one to change Cinderella's gown every night, and provide her with horses, a coach, and servants, all made from transforming the nearby rodents and lizards lying about. In this version of the story, Perrault expresses that Cinderella is a noble maiden in her own right, but it's through her fairy godmother that she is able to become more beautiful and divine through her grace than she otherwise would be on her own. It's through the magic of the fairy godmother that gives Cinderella her true nobility, helping her to become the queen of the kingdom by the end of the story. This act is something that actually ties into the fates of mythology, as fairy godmothers in many early fairy tales, like Sleeping Beauty, help the main character find their destined fate. It's the fairy godmother who aids Cinderella into becoming the queen. It's Sleeping Beauty's aged fairy godmother who curses her as a baby. And even in the tale of Beauty and the Beast by Villeneuve, it's the fairy godmother who curses the prince into becoming a beast, all of which leads to their destiny at the end of their stories, just as the fates of myth would decide the beginning and end of a person's life. As for the term fairy godmother, it plays to the concept of a divine or supernatural mentor who helps or sometimes even opposes the main character of a story, with the fairy, or fae, being a magical creature in many European cultures and folktales. It's one that appears to many as a human figure with magical powers that have the wings of either a bird or an insect. In some European folktales, gnomes and goblins are considered to be fairies, as they are presented in the same mystical way while playing into the more mischievous side of the supernatural. I think it's worth noting that this mischievousness is actually in part due to the Christianization of many of the pagan and pre-pagan beliefs, as many considered the supernatural creatures to be aspects of fallen angels or demons in disguise. Though this wasn't always the case for fairies, as the most common concept depicted them as beautiful and ethereal beings within Romantic art and Celtic folklore. As for the godmother portion of the fairy godmother, this stems from a Christian-held belief and title that plays into the mentor witnessing their godchild's baptism into the real world and formation into the good and holy person the child would become later in life. Again, to reiterate, the fairy godmother is a divine and supernatural mentor that is meant to help and sometimes even oppose, in some stories, the princess or prince into becoming what they are truly meant to be, helping in deciding their fate. Now, for the summons that the fairy godmother can help us with, there are 6 in total that we can acquire throughout our journey. We gain 3 through playing through the story, and the other 3 being hidden in chests around the many worlds. These summons include Simba, Bambi, Genie, Dumbo, Tinkerbell, and Mushu, all of whom derive from Disney movies and have a variety of uses and a plethora of stories behind them. That said, summons have been a staple through the Final Fantasy series, and are very well known to be deities of real-world myth. In researching this, I learned that there was originally meant to be a 7th summon, Bahamut, being the final and most powerful summon to acquire. Sadly, this was cut from the game, and even if you are able to have this summon in the menu, it actually crashes the game. That said, I'd like to take a moment to explain just briefly the myths behind these summons that we gain in our journey. Starting off with Simba, he's originally from Disney's The Lion King, and is the lead character striving to reclaim his kingdom from his uncle. This tale is a near direct mirror of William Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet, which was written and published sometime between 1599 and 1601 CE. Now, something I find interesting is that both these tales, The Lion King and Hamlet, actually originate from an ancient Egyptian myth of Set, the god of the desert, overthrowing his brother Osiris, the chief god over Egypt. To briefly explain, Set was angry at and jealous of his brother's power over Egypt. Wanting that power for himself, Set kills and dismembers the chief god, claiming the throne for himself. This action put all of Egypt into a state of disarray and darkness. But thankfully, the queen goddess Isis reassembled her husband using her magic and revived him into the living world for a brief time. After many years, Osiris would then come to rule the afterlife as he was essentially undead, and Isis would bear their son, Horus, the god of the sky. Through Horus, Set would be dethroned and run off from the land, and in some sources had actually hid himself as a hippopotamus, only to be speared through after being discovered by Horus. This ancient story plays again in Shakespeare's Hamlet, as the prince dethrones and kills his uncle, freeing his kingdom, though being killed himself in the process. Then, again, it's played within The Lion King, as Simba is able to dethrone and subsequently kill his uncle Scar. Acquired from the Nature Spark item, the summon Bambi is the lovable little deer that helps us maintain our magic. In this Disney story, he is the prince of the forest, who loses his mother due to man's encroachment further into the wilderness. As Bambi grows, he learns to become a strong protector of the forest and its many inhabitants. As for the original story, however, it presents many of the woodland creatures as frightened and frail creatures, just trying to survive in a further worsening landscape. Originally written in 1923 by Felix Salten, the story is meant to express man's selfishness towards nature, while metaphorically showing the growing problem of anti-Semitism during that time. This disdain for Jewish people that was progressing more and more in Europe during the 1920s was based on the perpetuated myth that Jews were the rats of the human race, being touted as the sole issue of the world's financial and social issues due to their non-Christian beliefs and more traditional practices. As these evil myths were propagated, many Jews were forced to condense into ghettos, where some became more aggressive towards one another in their desperation for survival. This is seen in Salten's Bambi, as many of the frightened animals begin to attack one another just to survive. Genie is our third summon that we acquire, and is the first of the two Disney characters that we gain as summons without the use of an item. Being acquired after completing Agrabah and defeating Jafar, Genie is a great damage dealer, and, in my opinion, is a very good attempt at portraying the late Robin Williams. Unfortunately, I won't be covering Genie here, as we'll be getting to explore him more when we get to Agrabah later on. Continuing on, our fourth summon is Dumbo, being gained through the Water Gleam item. This summon is actually one of my favorites, as you get to become completely invulnerable during its use. As for the story of Dumbo, it was first brought to film in 1941, and was originally a short story written by Helen Aberson and Harold Pearl sometime in the 30s. Unfortunately, the original story has been lost to time, and there's only bits and pieces of it that remain. But it tells of a small elephant who is born with larger than normal ears, and is constantly teased and bullied for having them. Eventually, he is able to overcome these troubles and learns to fly with his ginormous ears, becoming the star of the circus. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Dumbo, you might actually notice that it resembles the 1843 fairy tale of the Ugly Duckling in many ways. Both are teased and bullied for their appearance and mannerisms, while both have to endure the loneliness in their young lives by losing their loved ones, only to find themselves and accept who they truly are later in life. Dumbo being the amazing flying elephant, and the Ugly Duckling finding out that he's a swan in actuality, with both flying off into the sunset. In our fifth summon, and the second of the Disney summons gained without the use of an item, Tinkerbell is acquired after completing Neverland and defeating Captain Hook. Tinkerbell, in my opinion, is the best summon, as she will continually heal you as you fight, as opposed to someone who can never decide when to heal or when to attack. But Tinkerbell is a lot like Genie in that she is extremely important to the story and mythology behind Neverland. So, again, we won't be covering her here, but we will once we get to Neverland. Finally, we have Mushu, our last summon of our journey, being gained through the Fire Glow item after defeating Maleficent near the end of the game. Mushu is a small lizard who is
Dragon, not lizard. I don't do that tongue thing.
Right, sorry. Mushu is a fierce but small Chinese dragon who originates from Disney's Mulan, though the original legend during the 4th century CE doesn't feature a wisecracking dragon, it does tell relatively the same story when compared to Disney's portrayal. Both have Mulan take her father's place in the Chinese army while disguising herself as a man, and both have her saving her country, while being honored as a hero by the emperor, then returning home to where she is happiest. Now, where the story differs is that with the legend of Hua Mulan, she maintains her status in the army for 12 years, continually gaining promotions and accolades for her heroism. It's only when she returns home that she reveals to her comrades that she is in fact a woman. Now, for Mushu, he was an addition that Disney made to the story to help viewers become a bit more comfortable with the story and its context. According to the animators of Mushu, he is really a chimera that takes parts from each of the major animals within Asian folklore, having the horns of an elk, the face of a camel, the body of a snake, and the claws of an eagle. This combination of parts that make up Mushu isn't actually far off from what the Chinese believe with the legendary dragons, as many had the body of a snake, the claws of an eagle, and even the whiskers of a koi fish. This depiction stands in direct opposition to the Western dragon, as they are seen as monsters or devils. As for these Eastern dragons of myth, they were seen as the guardians of the land and of its people, being noted as the strongest and wisest of all creatures. Some reliefs and artifacts that date back to 6000 BCE depict them in this fashion. For Mulan and subsequently Sora, Mushu is a guardian of the family, or is otherwise known as a tutelary deity. I think this is incredibly fitting, as Mushu, when we summon him, actually stands atop Sora's head, not only acting as a protector of us, but as a watchdog as well, since all of his attacks hone in on enemies that we lock onto. I would also like to note that when looking at these summons and their associated items, the nature spark, fire glow, and so on, they each depict their elemental equal, while also sharing their association with the light, furthering the info given to us that these characters had so much light to them that even when their world was lost, their light remained, keeping them safe from the darkness. Now, with all that said, we can finally hand over the book that Sid asked us to bring to Merlin. Unfortunately, this book is not fully repaired, and many of the missing pages are scattered throughout the many worlds of Kingdom Hearts. These pages each fill out the book of the beloved story of Winnie the Pooh in the 100-Acre Wood. I remember watching these movies growing up, and even reading the stories for myself, enjoying each of the characters' portrayals of different aspects of human life. Now, this isn't a mythologically dense storybook, but through careful observation, we can learn just a bit. For starters, as I had mentioned before, the characters represent different parts of a person's life and even psyche, with Pooh being the relaxed inaction that people take in life, while Tigger represents the more energetic moments we have when doing things that we enjoy. This all has led to many believing the characters represent the teachings and philosophy behind Taoism, the Chinese philosophy and religious tradition that dates back to the 3rd century BCE. In Taoism, a person is meant to accompany the flow of the universe, learning of its ebbs and flow while being present within, well, the present. This understanding of Taoism and love of Winnie the Pooh has actually led to 2 books being written by Benjamin Hoff, the Tao of Pooh in 1982 and the Tay of Piglet in 1992. I was really hoping it would be 1993 because then that would rhyme. Each express a different thought behind how Taoism is represented with these characters within the 100-Acre Wood. The Tao of Pooh, for instance, presents the Chinese thinkers Confucius, Buddha, and Lao Tzu, the creator of Taoism, as tasters of a vat of vinegar. One says that it's sour, the other says that it's bitter, while Lao Tzu says that it's satisfying. This plays into the concept of present inaction, or the idea that living in the moment is the enjoyable part of life. This is what Pooh easily represents, as he is continually present within the moment, easily enjoying life as it comes. The first minigame of the storybook even sees this present in action take place as we're meant to just hang out with Pooh, casually swatting away bees as he eats honey without worry. It's not intense, it's not shooting for a high score, it's just being present. And honestly, just enjoying the music. I mean, just listen and tell me that this isn't enjoyable to listen to. This sort of sentiment is exactly what the 100-Acre Wood is about. Playing mini-games while hanging out with the lovable characters that have been our best friends growing up, and getting the chance to have them as our best friends all over again. And besides, is there anything better than just getting to sit with your friends to look up at the night sky? Leaving Merlin's hut, we finally run into Riku, and Sora couldn't be happier, though this encounter is short-lived, as Riku soon disappears just as quickly as he had appeared. This isn't because he's jealous of our new friends. Oh, no, not one bit. I mean, why would anyone want to be friends with two of the original Fab Five? I mean, I know I would. Once we get to the second district, we remember that the clock tower... Nope, wait, it's a bell tower. Let me start again. Getting to the second district, we remember that the bell tower had rang mysteriously. Investigating it, we find that ringing the bell 3 times presents the town's keyhole in the middle of the fountain. Not to sound like a broken record here, but there's a reason 3 is consistently used in so many games for things like bosses or tasks, as it's seen as a perfect number, creating a trinity of movement or action, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Jumping to the keyhole, we have to battle against the guard armor again, only this time he has a new trick up his sleeve. This guard armor transforms into the opposite armor, and honestly looks way cooler in my opinion. But defeating him is, again, a breeze, just like we did before, as defeating each piece gives us a lot of health orbs. But we finally get to lock the Traverse Town keyhole, give Sid the new navigation gummy, and make our way into the new worlds. Whew. 2 visits down, and we're technically at the halfway point for Kingdom Hearts. As I stated in the beginning of this video, I am so very thankful to you for watching this video, and amazed by how many people love the series. If you'd like to show your support and help out the channel, I have a Patreon where we post videos ahead of their release, uncut footage, and even scripts for both released and unreleased videos. As always, by liking the video and commenting, and even subscribing, you're showing YouTube that videos like this one deserve to be seen. So, thank you so much again, and I'll see you all next time.